Our topic is how to price ebooks for international markets. This is a topic that I actually found when I first started researching this for my own purposes was oddly difficult to find information on. And I had gotten in touch with our mutual friend, Mark Lefebvre, and asked him for advice on who might be able to speak knowledgeably about that. And he recommended you, so I know you're the right person for this because of Mark's recommendation. But before we dive into the details, just give our listeners a little bit of background on Kobo's international presence so they understand where you're coming from with the information you're bringing.
Sure. So Kobo is headquartered in Toronto and based in Canada. That's our home turf, but we're owned by a Japanese company called Rakuten, which some people might be familiar with because they have touch points on lots of different businesses throughout the world. So with the digital reading business, Kobo is in its 11th year now, which is sort of crazy when you think about how quickly things change in this area of business. So very quickly realized that to be successful, you had to have a global reach rather than focusing solely on just Canada or North America. So we have a lot of strategic retail partners throughout the world. For instance, we have Fnac in France and Portugal and Spain. We just partnered with Booktopia in Australia. We have partners in New Zealand, in the Philippines, and different areas. So it really allows us to keep readers reading all over the globe. I think on any given day, we're selling books in 190 countries or thereabouts.
Very exciting. So when I have gone onto ebook platforms to set my books up, normally after you've put in all the metadata and loaded your files, you'll get a page that gives pricing options. And in some platforms, at least, once you put in the price for your own market, let's say US, and I'm putting in $4.99 for my ebook, one option is that the system will default other prices into the international markets that are available. Does Kobo do that? And if it does, how does it calculate that? Is it just a straight currency conversion?
Yeah, Kobo Writing Life is the self-publishing platform for Kobo. So it allows authors that have their ebooks and audiobooks to publish directly to our website. We allow pricing in 16 currencies, which just goes to show where we're selling books, that it's in areas that necessitate 16 currencies. Your default currency is what you're getting paid in. So that's the price that you're putting in first. For example, your default would be USD as you're based in the States. So it is sort of a guesstimate of the rough exchange between the USD. And what we always recommend is that people try and actually just manually go in and update them to make them as attractive as possible. Customers are sort of preconditioned to respond really well to a 99-cent ending price point or a 49-cent ending price point. I would definitely make sure that in all of these currencies that you're offering books around that price.
Let's say you put in your home market pricing and then under the international markets, 547 appears. Is it legitimate just to go in and round it to whatever the next attractive price point is, ending in 49 or ending in 99?
I think that pricing is so subjective. There's a number of factors. It depends on the currency that you're talking about, the type of book that you're trying to sell, and the area where you're going to be selling your book. It's really important for authors to do their market research. I always recommend, if you're not too sure, take a look at the books that are selling similar to yours. What's the similar genre and what are those authors pricing? And Kobo, it's really, really easy to see the different storefronts throughout the world. On our website at kobo.com, there's a little flag at the top that indicates the geo that you're in. So you can see your American flag or your Canadian flag. And then if you click on that, you actually see all of our localized storefronts. It's a great opportunity for you to explore the different pricing options that are available throughout the world and see what other people are pricing too.
It does seem as if a straight conversion doesn't quite get to the price you want, because it seems to me that, for example, if I were to do a straight price conversion from US dollars to Australian currency, that I might come up with a number, but that the Australian market actually has a higher tolerance for higher price points, whereas India, for example, has a lower tolerance than you might get if you just did a straight conversion. I like the suggestion of going in and looking for what other authors are doing. How does an indie author find comp authors to use to model their pricing on?
Well, that's The beautiful thing about Kobo is that we don't differentiate between indie and traditionally published authors. They're all mixed in together. From a customer point of view, you can't really tell who is indie and who isn't. So for the purpose of this exercise, it's maybe not the easiest thing because you're trying to compare, but we do see, that's sort of a good point actually, that indie books are increasing in pricing while traditionally published books are decreasing, just to show how similar both are to our customers, that the pricing is probably really similar regardless of where the books are coming from. Any of the books that you have, there's if you liked this, you'll also like this. And it's where our algorithms are trying to train our customers to see buying behavior, that they might have purchased your book and here's books that are complementary in the genre that you're in. So I would explore that. We definitely have heard reports from authors that not all of their complementary authors are the same. So on Amazon, they might be different to the authors that people are buying similar to theirs on Barnes & Noble. So it might be worth doing a little bit of research if you are publishing wide to see who your comparable authors are, especially within the genres. And then I would look at different pricing. It sounds like a lot of work, but it really isn't. It's just something that you would do while you're browsing around. And it's also a great opportunity for you to potentially collaborate with somebody. Maybe there's someone that's in your authors that are similar to Kobo, and it's a good opportunity to bundle up together or do some sort of promotion. It's good to keep an eye on who's selling where.
I think the tough part about doing research on this is that as a not yet terribly well-known indie author, I don't necessarily want to use Stephen King as my pricing model. And although I am sure that Stephen King's publishing house is doing lots of research and has a team of people who are focused on pricing for international markets, the people who are more comparable to me from a pricing point of view, it's hard to tell how careful they're being about their international pricing. I think my fear is that I'm modeling myself on someone who just took a guess. Is there a way to test out your assumptions? If I price at a certain level in India, should I be running tests at different price points to see which one gets the most traction?
Yeah, absolutely. That's the beautiful thing about having control over everything, and especially the pricing, is that you can experiment really easily. You can do your own little A/B test and change the pricing of your books and see the feedback that you get from readers, or even just in the sales numbers themselves. So that's definitely something that you can do. We actually have a price promotion tool. It allows you to set a price. So you can either set a permanent price change forever or just set a price change for a specific time period. So for example, if you wanted to test different pricing in India, you could go in and change the Indian price for a week and then explore and see how that affected sales. And you can set it up ahead of time without having to worry about changing the price and changing back. It's a handy little tool to have, but I definitely would say to experiment with the different pricing. And also take a look at where you're selling on Kobo in general in terms of pricing. That might lead you toward the areas where you would want to experiment. Something that we find that users maybe overlook. We have a lot of customers throughout the world, and some are publishing translations. We have some that are selling more books in French than they are in English, but they're based in North America. So if you're publishing in different languages, or if your audience is somewhere else, something to keep in mind is, say for French, for instance, don't just set the euro price. You want to make sure that you're also setting a really good Swiss franc price, because there's a lot of French readers there. Tweak the areas where you're setting prices and make sure that you're reaching all the readers possible.
If you have a book that is in English, for example, and you're selling it in France in its English format, and you also have a translation of that book selling in France, should the price of those books be the same, or are there different expectations between those two?
I think there's certainly different expectations. I think it goes back to researching the market. And with translations in general, you have to put a lot of research into things even beyond the pricing. Is your cover going to be different? Are you going to market differently? It would definitely be something to consider. You also don't want to put off readers. French readers are also English readers a lot of the time. So if they see that your book is priced differently, that might not be a great customer experience. But yeah, I think it's all part and parcel with the market research that you're doing.
On Kobo, if someone were to search for me on the French site and I had a translation of my books, would they see the English version and the French version right next to each other so that that price comparison would be easy for a reader to see?
Our search is based on where the customer is. If I'm searching, English will be my default language. But if your account is set up like you're only purchasing French books, we're just going to show you the French books first. So it's harder to find the English books. We're always trying to give the customer what we think that they're actually looking for first. So it wouldn't be as obvious that they would be one next to one another, but it is possible with tweaking the filters in our search.
If someone is doing an international price promotion like through BookBub, and of course you then have to set the price at all the international markets that the promotion is going to, but there are many markets that are available to platforms like Kobo that aren't covered by a BookBub promotion. Is it important to discount across the board, or would you only really need to discount in the markets where you've committed to discounting it to BookBub?
It's a personal preference. I think with our price promotion tool, you have the option of only selecting currencies that you want to discount in. You don't have to select them all. But I think it depends on the marketing strategy that you're doing. Are you sending a newsletter out that is going to people in all of these different regions? What promotion are you doing around that? That might be how you decide if you want to discount it everywhere. It might be easier to just discount it everywhere. And then if you're wide, you'll do all of your retailers the same. But I know sometimes you might want to just target a specific Canada option and not discount the rest of them. It's completely up to the author preference. I'm trying to think of author behavior, what we're seeing people do. And I think it's probably 50-50 with doing all of them and only doing a little bit of them.
I'm always hesitant to make a change in pricing because I'm afraid that I'll type something in incorrectly. And I've had a couple of circumstances on Amazon, on KDP, where I've gone in and it's possible that I made a data entry error, or it's also possible that KDP just went and changed the price of my book on its own. So it's hard to know where the oddity is coming from. But one thing that I did, I'm a big fan of spreadsheets. So here's my tip for people
Me
who are trying to
too.
manage entry of multiple market functions is that I have all the markets and the price I want to price my books at in each market. And then I have columns that are how those markets appear on the different platforms. On what order do they appear on Kobo? What order do they appear on Amazon? What order do they appear on Drafted Digital, for example? And then I can resort the list so I can bang through it, because I found that I was more error prone if I was jumping around, if I was scanning a spreadsheet and having to jump around, whereas if I ordered it in the Kobo order and then could just rip through the the Kobo user interface to enter it, that I made fewer mistakes. At least I hope I'm making fewer mistakes. That's my tip of the day for listeners.
It's terribly organized of you. I love it.
Yeah, well, you do it once and then you can save yourself hours of pain later on.
Absolutely.
How often should authors reassess their international pricing? If I look at the US market, I've set my first in series books at $2.99. I've set the rest of them at $4.99, and they've been like that for a long time. Is it necessary to reassess each market on some schedule?
That's a great question. I do think it is worthwhile. Sometimes people set their price and leave their books, and then that's it. Kobo Writing Life is now 8 years old. So if you set a book 8 years ago, you might not be as competitive in the market anymore. I would definitely say to review your pricing. It maybe once a year, and maybe if you are doing your taxes, you could look at your pricing there because you're already in it, and that might be a good time. Say if you're launching a new series, compare it to your last series. How did they sell comparable to that, and what is the pricing that worked well for that series? I also would also say, sadly, you have to keep an eye on things that are happening in the world, that the pricing fluctuates. So in times of crisis, for instance, right now, the currencies are affected in a particular way, or people might be pricing differently. So this is probably a good time to reassess what pricing you're doing. And then, like I mentioned earlier, we're seeing a significant rise in indie pricing and then publishers coming to meet us in the middle. So I do think that there's room for one band pricing for ebooks. There's no real rules about how often to do it, but I would say if you're doing it once a year, to have a little look and see, and not in too much detail, but I think that's probably a good rule of thumb.
Great. Well, Tara, thank you so much for sharing that information. Let the listeners know where they can go online to find out more about Kobo Writing Life and about you.
Sure. So we have a blog that's kobowritinglife.com. We also have a weekly podcast that's called the Kobo Writing Life podcast, where we feature tips and interviews for authors on all parts of their career. Our platform is kobo.com/writinglife, and you can find us there. And if you are interested in emailing us at all about anything, if you have any questions, you can reach us at writinglife@kobo.com.
Thank you so much, Tara. This was very helpful.